The VibeCatch podcast brings you the latest in employee engagement, workforce productivity, and people analytics.
Hello, so welcome back to the VibeCatch podcast. My name is Janne. I will be hosting this session where we continue to talk to Dasa Suissa about employee engagement. And in this episode, we were thinking about moving to talk more about the leadership's role in engaging the employees. So what's your first take on that, Dasa? How would you approach this topic?
Yes, so what I would say is that the key role of the leaders is to lead by example, and I believe that is more important than them just supporting an implementation of any employee engagement program. So I believe this is setting the scene really for enabling people to be creative, to really go out of their way and do their best. That's very much something that is created by their leaders. So setting the scene is something I believe is the first very key thing leaders need to do or enable. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to say it's a sort of if the leaders don't sort of show the example of how engaged they are, if they are sort of not really making that picture towards the employees, it's very difficult to expect that from the employees, of course. It's quite clear.
Exactly. So in a way we could say that leaders needs to be the first ones who actually show their engagement, and other people just follow quite naturally. They follow what they see in their leaders. So the level of their passion, the level of the inspiration that they display to their employee is very much something that creates the right environment for people to feel passionate about their work and really do their best.
Is there something that the leaders can do? I mean, of course, they show the example, but is there something that they can do actually then to transfer that passion, transfer that engagement to the employees? I mean, of course, it's do you have something in mind, like concrete actions that they can take that actually would help in adapting that to the whole workforce?
Yeah, I think it comes from what they show rather than what they do. So people very much follow. Emotions are contagious. We know that from research. So if we feel that the leader is themselves like passionate and is themselves inspired by the environment and by what they do, people naturally follow that. So I think there's a very common misconception that engaging employees comes from actions, and from what you do. It actually much more comes from how you are, how you come across, and what level of engagement and what level of emotional intelligence you actually display.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's not a magic tool that would make anything like that happen.
No.
That being said, I think it's actually then in some way turns back into communication as well. I think that's I think the magic word in every organization always to kind of so it leads back into communication, how you actually then present yourself, or how do you actually communicate the important topics to the employees and get them on board.
For example, so that's definitely true. Another thing I would probably add to that is that the level of empathy that leaders show to their employees is yet another very important aspect of like what drives or what co-creates employee engagement. I've come across an interesting research recently that said that over 90% of employees really needs to be heard, and they need their leaders to show empathy. And the research also said that it had a huge impact on how engaged they were, how they obviously then performed, and it even impacted the levels of employee retention. So I think that's quite dramatic, and that's quite a good reason why leaders should take this into account and perhaps engaged into an inquiry around their levels of, how much empathy they're showing to their own employees.
Okay, it's interesting. I mean, then think about the different. Now we've kind of discussed about the leadership's role, and then we agreed that it's a lot about leading by example. And in the earlier episodes, we discussed the HR's role in the whole picture. What about other stakeholders, middle management, of course, the employees themselves? I mean, is there some player who is kind of in a more important role than the other one, or is this really a joint challenge for everyone?
Yeah, I would still say that the role of peers is very important. So there's quite a lot of research backing that up as well, that many employees decide to leave because of conflicts among peers. But also I wouldn't like to underestimate the very role of the employee. Yeah, so employee engagement is not something that is created for the employee. It's co-created. So no matter, I will now turn it around a little bit, and no matter how good a leader is, if in the first place you don't have employees who have a certain level of their own engagement, then no matter how well you do your job as a leader, you're probably not going to be very successful. So we really need to look at it as a whole. The employee plays a big role, peers play a big role, their immediate boss plays a role. Also, we know that what drives, or what's even one of the biggest drivers of employee engagement, is the level of trust in senior management. So that means yet another thing, because no matter how distant these people are or how close they are, we know they have impact because they are the direction setters. And if you do not believe in the direction or the purpose of your company, it will have impact on your engagement.
Absolutely. Yeah, in a way, I see it. Like when we talk about trust, I think it's also kind of leads this topic towards transparency and how important it is that the kind of employees understand why certain decisions are made, and then why the leadership is sort of leading towards a certain direction, and also kind of if they kind of in both ways. I mean, also it's important that then the employees have their voice heard, so the leaders know what might be the boiling points or the bottlenecks in the organization, and really to kind of then share the responsibility, like to be transparent about the problems also, or the positive things as well, and then to share the ownership and share the responsibility of fixing things. So it's not like employees would be expecting the corner office to fix all their issues and that. So it's really kind of a joint team play. Yeah.
Yes, I like that. And I'd like to build on what you've just said about employees needing their voice to be heard. As you said it, there's another study that just crossed my mind that I recently read, and it said that those employees that really do have that sense of being heard feel 5 times as empowered than those who just feel like they're not being heard. So I think again that's quite a dramatic result, and I think worth taking into account.
How can managers and leaders actually make or kind of show the employees that they are being heard? I mean, I think that's one thing. I think of course there's channels and there's tools where they can communicate their worries and their concerns and their joys, but I mean I'd assume they would need something back in order to kind of create this feeling of having a dialogue in the company.
Yes, I think that's a really good question, because what I see very often is that managers have good routines with their employees, like one-to-ones and stuff like that, but very often the content of such routines does not really help the employees to feel being heard, because very very often it's operational. So it's about okay, what's on your to-do list, where do you need help, where do you need to postpone your deadline, and so on and so on. Okay, I exaggerate a little bit just to make a point, but what I'm trying to say really is that leaders really need to distinguish between very operational discussions and discussions that go beyond that go into how employees actually feel at work. Do they feel they're doing what they want to do? Do they feel they're contributing in a way that they want to contribute? Do they believe in the direction of the company? Do they have all the conditions they feel they need to do their jobs well? And that's something that I do not think is yet a common practice.
I fully agree there. I think it's very operational what we see in most companies, and also I think I think many managers, many leaders, they are a bit troubled, or they don't maybe have the right ways to kind of address these topics without sort of starting to point fingers at anyone or anyone, but really to kind of approach the kind of the mission of the company and the kind of feeling of belonging in the company in a kind of a constructive way. So I think that's definitely something there's a lot of learning potential still to be done. Good.
Yes. Let me maybe add one thing to that. I think perhaps a step in between, just having operational discussions and trying to engage in a qualitatively different discussion with employees could be just maybe looking for a way how you could collect a level of feedback, even using some kind of platform, because that helps managers it helps them to ask the right questions, and it helps them to really structure the feedback and really touch on all or at least the most important aspects of employee experience. So I genuinely believe that this kind of platforms can be helpful and can help to build a good habit of really starting to listen to the slightly deeper needs of the employees.
Yeah, and I think it should really kind of, when we talk about listening, it should be like more that it's up to the employee, that they have a chance, that they have a channel where they can communicate if they have something on their hearts. Whereas I think typically or traditionally, let's say, this kind of this listening has been done in the form of surveys, like annual surveys, where it's kind of it seems to be something that it's more important to get the people to answer than it's actually what they answer.
Yeah.
And I think that I would like to talk more about the structure, and I think that's a very important word in this topic, because a lot of when we talk about employee engagement or employee experience, like you just said, it's sort of it's topics that are not very tangible always.
Yes.
I think that's where you need the structure, so that you can sort of really look into the different topics and find out the right. Even though you said earlier that it's not about the actions, how you improvise. I mean, there is still actions that you can take, and you can find those actions when you have structurized the employee experience, the employee engagement in some format, and that's something that, like you said, can be achieved with certain platforms, for example. That's a very good point.
Yes, exactly, and it's associated with how you can actually measure employee engagement. So the way you structure your questions then helps you to really look into the different aspects of employee engagement that you tend to embrace well, and then perhaps some others that you have an opportunity to work better with. And I believe that this is something we can address in some of the next podcasts.
Yeah, I think it's definitely it's I think when we start talking about the measuring of engagement, it's definitely a separate topic that I would be happy to address in the next episodes. I think for now we'll wrap this one up, and then thank you, Dasa, for joining us again for this podcast. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the next episodes on VibeCatch.com.
Thanks for listening to the VibeCatch podcast. Visit our website, VibeCatch.com, for more resources and insights on employee engagement, human productivity, and HR technology. Don't forget to subscribe to get the latest podcast right in your inbox.